All right, Jim. Well, let's end the show with something that is right, and that is guess the program.
Aha!
I got
some historical content for our historical wrestling fan friends.
I got to make some room here.
Oh, wait a minute. You bringing in a whole stack?
I have a whole stack, so I got to pick which ones I want to hit you with. I got a few.
Don't hit me with them. Ask me about them. I didn't come here to be abused.
Well, let's.
Yeah. See, you'll get us canceled for violence.
I'll start you with a relatively easy one in terms of location, probably.
Well, and of course, just for the newbies out there, Brian hits me with a lineup from a program from his collection, and I am tasked with trying to figure out the place and the year in which said incident occurred.
That's right. These are programs from my collection, typically ones I have not filed away yet, so they are here next to the desk.
Unfiled.
Jim, this first program, the opening bout, Steve Taylor versus Rudy Burke.
Okay.
In a tag team match, Robbie Stewart and Keith Hart versus Angel Perone and Chicky Perone.
And with their manager, Juan.
With their manager, Ava Perone. Hubert Gallant versus Kung Fu. The Cuban Assassin versus Davey Boy Smith. Tim Shea versus Mike Shaw.
Shea Shaw.
After Shea versus Shaw, which follows Smith versus the Assassin, we have Ho Chi Lao versus Hercules Ayala. And in the main event, 6-man triple tag team match. Duke Myers, Kerry Brown, and the Dynamite Kid versus Bruce Hart, Bret Hart, and Leo Burke.
Oh my gosh. Obviously this is Stampede Wrestling. The question would be, is it Calgary or Edmonton for a card like this? And one would think that it'd probably be Calgary, but I'll take my finger off that checker here in a second. Obviously, Steve Taylor, if it's the same one, went on to become a photographer for the WWF. I don't think that's it. Some of these folks we've not heard of. Keith Hart, obviously we have. Hubert Gallant. The Cuban Assassin was Angel Acevedo. He famous Cuban in the business. Davey Boy, obviously. I don't need to go any further.
Hey, let me just jump in right now because some fans may not be aware there was a second Cuban Assassin. So if you were watching WCW in the 90s, that's not the same Cuban Assassin.
No.
That's David Sierra.
Yes. Fidel Sierra, David Sierra, Dave Canal. He had 18 million mask gimmicks, but no, he was a different Cuban. This was the Cuban Assassin. Angel Acevedo was huge in West Virginia back in the days when that was a territory, and then worked all over the place and was here in the Memphis territory in, I think, 81-ish, teaming up with the Iranian Assassin, who was actually Jack Kruger, who was Bruiser's ex-ring truck driver. But
there's so many cheap heels then. The Turk, the Monk.
Yes, El Mongol, the Iranian, the Russian invader. But Mike Shaw would later become Muckin Singh there in Calgary, and Norman the Lunatic, and Trucker Norman, and Bastion Booger.
Friar Ferguson, my favorite.
Yeah, Friar Ferguson. I don't know. Who was Ho Chi Lao? Was that one of Bruce Hart's ribs on somebody?
I do not see a picture here. I'm going through some of the other programs because I have a few from this time period. Here's Mr. Hito. Here's Jude Rosenblum. I don't know who this guy is. And there's no picture of Ho Chi Lao.
And Hercules Ayala was a name in Puerto Rico and various points. And by the way, Bruce, when he was booking, Lance Storm told me this. They made a manager named Dixon Cox, right? And then they had a girl valet on the other side that he did an angle with just so that he could hear the announcer say that the girl, whatever her name was, she wants to get her hands on Dixon Cox. She wants to get a hold of Dixon Cox. But anyway, then Duke Myers was huge in Calgary, but he, as a young man, worked Tennessee, teaming with Terry Garvin. And he was at that point like 6'3" and 300 pounds. And later on, when he came back 10 years later, after he had this big long run in Calgary, I managed him. He had dropped down to about 260, and God, he had that fucking giant head and these big hands. He'd knock the fuck out of you. Kerry Brown was Bulldog Bob Brown's nephew, the Dynamite Kid everybody's familiar with, and then Bruce and Brett. And Leo Burke was a heck of a guy. He worked with us for a while in Charlotte, I think in 86.
Oh, no shit. I didn't really, I forgot about that.
Yes. Yeah. He was down there for a while, but he was a member of the Cormier family, right? The Beast and Rudy Kay and Leo Burke and all those guys. Was it the Maritimes?
Yeah. And remember, the opening bout here was Steve Taylor versus Rudy Burke.
He may have been, that may have been Rudy Kay.
Yeah.
But they were the top dogs in, again, where is it? The Maritimes, Newfoundland, it wasn't Nova Scotia, whatever part of Canada up there. So anyway, and because this was Mike Shaw before he became Muck and Sing, and Duke was there, Kerry Brown was there, I've got to say, it was at 1981 Calgary.
Very close. The town, Calgary. The date, Friday, April 30th, 1982.
All righty.
And we're getting ready for the girls to come in because on the cover, a picture of Wendy Richter and Joyce Grable, officially recognized as the world's ladies tag team wrestling champions. And on the inside, Sabrina and Princess Victoria. And here's a quote. Princess Victoria says, "Bill Watts smells like sardines." Wait,
hey!
What? I'm sorry, that was the wrong issue here. But there you go. You got the right place. Just not the right year, but let's get to the next one.
It must have been the right place, but the wrong time.
Let's see. Should we do this one?
I'll just be over here mac-rebinacking.
This one's a little too easy. Let's try this one. Let's see. Ooh, this one.
Oh, don't dare give me an easy one.
No, I couldn't. This one. All right, here we go. The opening bout. Mark Starr versus Carl Franks. The second contest. Carlos Mendoza versus Len Rossi.
Ooh.
The third bout. Mike Paducis versus Mario Milano. The fourth contest. Don Green versus Tex Riley.
Jesus.
There will be a 10-minute intermission, and the main event for the World's Heavyweight Championship, 2 out of 3 falls, 1 hour time limit. Buddy Rogers versus Joe Scarpa.
Good Lord. Okay. We are, at first when you said Mark Starr, I was thinking the modern Mark Starr.
I know.
But then as soon as you got to Carlos Mendoza and Len Rossi, we are in the extended Gulas Welch territory of Tennessee in some respect. Here, Buddy Rogers being the champion narrows it down to 1961, 62, or 63. Of course, Len Rossi was the top babyface on the Gulas end of the Tennessee territory, Nashville, Chattanooga, Birmingham for years and years, but this would be the early part of that, and he wasn't on top yet. Mike Paducis played football at the University of Tennessee and was a journeyman around the South. Mario Milano was huge in Tennessee for some reason. I don't know that there was a huge Italian contingent, but he was also one of Barnett's top stars in World Championship Wrestling in Australia in the 60s.
Maybe the single biggest babyface star, if you ask some of those fans there today. Still.
Yeah. Don Green, obviously a member of the Mean Greens, the Heavenly Bodies, Don and Al Green. And Tex Riley was one of the all-time top baby faces in this territory that was one of Roy Welch's right-hand men, along with Wild Bill Caney and those other guys that you saw. Riley worked from the late 30s through the early 60s in the Tennessee territory. And Joe Scarpa, who was wrestling Buddy Rogers, would later become Chief J. Strongbow after he had finished being an Italian babyface in all the southern territories. So the question is, where is this? And there's so many places it could be.
Would the NWA champion, are there towns you could rule out that there's no way the NWA champion would have been brought into by Gulas and Welch?
No, believe it or not, Birmingham, Chattanooga, Nashville at various points. Chattanooga and Birmingham probably got more NWA title matches than Nashville did because they were drawing bigger gates. They had bigger buildings in those towns than the Hippodrome in Nashville at that point in time. It's not Memphis because it ain't Memphis. But it also could be East Tennessee because of Mike Paducas. You know what? I'm going to go with Birmingham in 1962.
The date, Monday night, August 14th, 1961. Memphis, Tennessee.
What?
Why did you say it wasn't Memphis?
Why? Because I never remember seeing a card like that in Memphis.
You ruled it out completely. I was shocked. You just said, hey, it's not Memphis because it's not Memphis. I'm like, what?
There's not enough Memphis talent on that card at that. For 1961, I would have thought the Greens would have been together. I would have thought Tex Riley would have been over in Birmingham.
Well, actually, here's an interesting note. What may have been the world title match originally. Again, Joe Scarpa got this, the future Chief J. Strongbow. Fargo misses chance at world title.
Jackie. Well, go ahead.
Oh, Jackie.
I was just going to say that wouldn't have narrated because Fargo was huge in Birmingham, too.
Jackie Fargo was among those in contention for tonight's try at the world's heavyweight title, which is held by Buddy Rogers. But Fargo's chances were eliminated when he was hospitalized in Nashville last week with a kidney infection. It is reported Fargo is rapidly improving, but will be hospitalized for an indefinite period.
You know, that probably pissed the fuck out of Fargo because Rogers was his idol. Yeah. He took the strut, he took the pally, he took the blonde hair, him and Donnie both. That was the Pfefferized. The Fargos were Jack Pfeffer's vision of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers as a tag team.
And this is 61, so this is just him getting established in Memphis.
No, they'd been there since 57, on and off.
Were they there? Okay.
Yes.
Because I never think about them during that prime period of 59 and 60.
Yeah, they had a big run in 57, a big run in 59. There was a period of time that the Fargos were on top. They were drawing 5,000 people a week in Chattanooga in 59.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, but anyway, all right, I screwed that one up.
All right, well, let me give you a different, this one will test your knowledge of something. Let's see how well you know yourself. Jim, the first event from St. Louis, Iceman King Parsons versus from New York, Bobby Eaton. The second event, Buck Rock and Roll.
By the way, for whatever reason, when we got to World Class Wrestling in Dallas, they had originally billed the Midnight Express from New York. I have no idea why. We read it in the program with everybody else.
Well, we've now established this is the Midnight Express in World Class, so the question's going to be, how well do you know you? You're going to have to figure out when in World Class, and that's a limited period of time.
Right.
The second bout, Buck Rock and Roll Zumhoff, the dirtbag out of Hawaii, versus Crippler Rip Oliver out of Florida, 262. The third event, from the City of Angels, Tommy Rogers versus New York's own Dennis Condrey. Dennis Condrey. The fourth event, from 3 question marks, the missing link. We don't know where he's from, but he weighs 245 pounds. Versus Billy Haynes out of Oregon, 260. In the main event, a tag team match, Kevin and Mike Von Erich, Denton County, versus Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez out of England and, of course, Highland Park.
Oh, good Lord.
A coin flip will determine the order of the matches. Your referees, David Manning, Bronco Lubitsch, and Rick Hazard. Your matchmaker, Ed Watt.
Yeah, Ed Watt was an old man that he probably had something to do with Ed McLemore and that generation of the 50s and 60s there in Dallas, and they named him as matchmaker instead of Ken Mantell or whoever the actual booker was, just so we know. Well, King Parsons, everybody knows Iceman Parsons had a big run in World Class that when we got there was closing up at that chapter of it. Buck Zumhoff was in there, and boy, he was always the shits to begin with, even before we knew that he was a dirtbag. Rip Oliver had come in from Portland with Billy Jack, because that's when Billy Jack came in, Billy Jack Haynes, to take Kerry's place when Kerry was supposed to be off for the movie because they thought he was going to get the part that Dolph Lundgren originally got in the Rocky movie. Did I say that correctly?
I believe so, yes.
So they brought Billy Jack in, and then Kerry didn't get the part in the movie. And then, Billy Jack was expecting this main event spot, and he said, fuck it, I'm going to go back to Portland. And Rip Oliver went with him, and I was managing Rip. They gave him to me. That's why they did a deal where he slammed the door on Mike Von Erich's claw hand in Fort Worth on TV and got suspended so he could go back to Portland. Tommy Rogers, we obviously know. Bobby Fulton was not on the card that night, apparently. The missing link was Dewey Robertson. We've told a few stories about him. And Adams, Gino, everybody knows. It's 1985. It is obviously world-class wrestling. Rip and Billy Jack came in shortly after we got there, but at the same time, and by the way, Chris Adams was advertised in the main event on the card with Billy Jack. As you will recall, we've talked about this, but it's been a few years. When Chris Adams found out Billy Jack was coming into the territory, on the first night Billy Jack was there, Chris Adams was out of town and didn't come back for a week because he thought Billy Jack was going to beat the fuck out of him over, it was Jeannie Clark, right?
Billy Jack Haynes married Jeannie Clark, and Chris Adams was obviously the one who went up to Portland with her. She married Billy Jack Haynes, and I believe there was a bit of heat around that.
Yes. And so as a result, Adams left town and didn't show up that night, the night that Billy Jack got there. And there was some element of discussion with the office and Billy Jack and then the office and Adams via telephone or whatever for Adams to be assured that Billy Jack wasn't going to kill him, and then he came back.
Were you around the baby faces at all in the locker room in World Class?
Well, like in Fort Worth, yes, because the locker rooms were together. In the Sportatorium in Dallas, some of the time, although the Von Erichs dressed up in the catacombs of the Sportatorium, and with the other buildings, it was iffy a lot. So not a ton, no.
Was Billy Jack Haynes the kind of guy you wouldn't want to fuck with? I mean, how did he come across? He seems like such a fascinating guy, like before he completely went mad.
No, the people that have seen Billy Jack on the videos with the gray hair and the Beatles cut and modern stuff where he's talking about all this crazy shit. No, he looks like, an old grandpa on the porch. Billy Jack Haynes in 1985 was 6'4" and 270 pounds and had a body equivalent to fucking Luger's and had a movie star fucking look with the beard and the hat. He was the Billy Jack, the movie was a gimmick. That was his gimmick, right? And no, the reason why that he was at that point, he was always pleasant and low key and talked softly and never got upset because he had at one point before wrestling gotten in a fight with a guy, let his temper get the better of him, and killed a fucking guy. Just hit him too hard. Didn't shoot him or stab him or anything, just hit him too hard. And
that's what Scott Hall did too.
Yeah, so, he tried to control, he had a very soft handshake and a very pleasing demeanor and controlled his temper and everything at that point, right? But you knew that if he wanted to, he could break you in fucking half. And it wasn't like he was a wrestling shooter. He wasn't going to stretch you. He was a beast. And then to see that's why I said when I saw these modern videos, what the fuck happened to this guy? Is it CTE that was undiagnosed? Whatever, but
soft-spoken?
Yes. I mean, you could see where you don't want to fuck with him, but I never gave him any reason to yell at me. And he came in, he did his business. When he found out he wasn't going to have Kerry's spot, he fucking went back to Portland. And they didn't beat him on the way out because Rip had come as a favor to Billy Jack because, he wanted maybe somebody, a heel to work with or whatever, and it didn't get that far.
It's fascinating just because everyone thought he was going to be a breakout star of the 80s. He was on the magazine covers right away. He had the physique that became the in physique in the 80s. And he went from Portland. He was in Mid-Atlantic, walked out of there. Florida, walked out of there.
Yeah.
World Class, did he walk out or did he?
Well, he didn't walk out. He just said, well, I'm going to go back home now. Yeah, because you got Kerry. So
WWF brought him in or tried to bring him in the first time, did a vignette video. They did that famous magazine cover of the program where it's like Hogan and Wendy Richter and Barry Windham and Billy Jack Haynes on a sled. A cartoon, not a real life.
Right.
And then he never came in. Then they didn't bring him in. And he came in like a year and a half later in 86. And by that point, his reputation was out there. There was a limit on how far he could be pushed.
Yeah, because he would never stay and he would get disgruntled or he would go back home or what. And then he tried to run opposition to Don Owens in Portland when
he did.
They got sideways. Well, he did run opposition. And when they got sideways, and that kind of buried him there. And then there was no place else to go. The end. Well, anyway, back to this. This has to be, I'm going to say it's February or March, and it looks like a Fort Worth lineup. I don't think this is the Sportatorium.
I regret to inform you, this is the World Class Wrestling Sportatorium program.
Son of a bitch. Okay, it was a Sportatorium.
Dallas, Texas, January 4th, 1985.
Shit,
so you had just gotten in there.
Okay, I would have thought that it was February because I didn't remember off the top of my head Rip and Billy Jack coming in that soon. I thought we had been there a few weeks but this was before I had Rip to manage. So I guess this may have been his first appearance there.
The fury and heat continue between the Fantastics and the Midnight Express.
Yeah, that's why Rogers is wrestling Condrey in a single match, third on the fucking card.
Although the popular duo from the City of Angels were unsuccessfully challenged once by the Express, manager Jim Cornette has issued a second challenge to Rogers and Fulton. To the delight of fans throughout the area, the Fantastics have once again accepted their outcries for a rematch. 1 week from tonight, right here at the Sportatorium, Rogers and Fulton will put their belts on the line and wrestle the Midnight Express. Express manager Jim Cornette is delighted that a rematch was scheduled so soon and is looking forward to, and this is in quotes, surprising the Fantastics with some of his personally invented secret weapons.
I don't know. I think this was probably, you know what? This was probably like Ralph Pulley. Ralph Pulley, the B-team ring announcer, was writing this shit.
Immediately, the question arises, are these weapons legal? Well, when January 11th comes around, we shall all see what Mr. Cornette has planned for that championship match. Tonight, Loverboy Dennis Condrey will meet popular Tommy Rogers one-on-one. There's a wrinkle we never got. Jim Cornette, the weapon inventor. That you would just have like crazy weapons you would invent and no one could find, and you use them during a match.
Hold on here 1 second. Oh, God damn it. I'm looking up. Because here's we talk about shitty booking. Remember, I've always said Ken Mantell was the worst booker I ever fucking worked for.
Yes,
be honest with you.
Specifically about this feud with the Fantastics, right?
Okay, yes, but well, specifically everything I saw in the whole fucking company the whole time I was there. They brought to Midnight Express in the Fantastics are the tag team champions. So our first night in Dallas, besides a couple of TV tapings, our first night at a house show was Reunion Arena, Christmas night '84, in a tag team title match against the fucking Fantastics, and they beat us in front of 20,000 people, $185,000 house. They fucking beat us. So, and by the way, our payoffs were $800 a piece. That's when we really got boo-boo face. But then on the 4th, now that I'm looking at this goddamn book, in Dallas, Bobby beat Iceman, but Dennis and Tommy Rogers went to a 20-minute draw because that was a TV night. Every 2 weeks, they did TV at the Sportatorium, the world-class syndication, and every 2 weeks was a house show. So they were promoting the goddamn next week, the TV or the tag team title match, and the following week, we won the tag team championship at the Sportatorium in front of a $23,000 house, by the way. But then we had the belts for like 6 weeks, and then they did a thing where they were held up pending a rematch, and we had a rematch, and they were held up again. And then they did the thing where they switched them at Texas Stadium in that goddamn rotten match with Little John Harris. So, yeah, as a matter of fact, in March, we had the belt 6 weeks. And then March, we were disqualified on Dallas TV. And so they held the belts up because of a disqualification. And in almost 2 months, we defended the belts 6 times. We lost by disqualification 5, and we won once. That was the way Ken Mantell booked. It sounded like Tony Khan.
Well, Jim,
so, anyway.
Well, let's go to our next program here. The card, the opening bout, Jim Hady out of Detroit, 220, versus Guy Hill, Winnipeg, 235.
And that's Hady, correct?
That is
Gentleman
correct.
Jim? Okay.
He would later die in the ring in Hawaii.
And Guy Hill. That's Guy Mitchell, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Not Bobby Heenan's brother, because a lot of people believed that for many years.
Where did that get started?
I'm not sure. But
he managed, Guy Mitchell was one of the assassins that Bobby managed when he first got into business, but they were not brothers.
Well, that is one fall, 30-minute time limit. The second bout, a special feature, one fall, 30-minute time limit. Bob Geigel, Amarillo, 240, versus an opponent to be named. Swami the dog barks at UPS man. That is a special attraction in the middle of this card. A special bout, Jim, one fall, 30-minute time limit. Len Montana, Bronx, New York, 270, versus Nick Roberts, Tampa, Florida, 242. The semifinal bout, one fall, 30-minute time limit. Hard-boiled Haggerty, New York, 243, versus Roy McClarty, Winnipeg, 245. And Swami is still going. The main event, one fall, 1 hour time limit.
Help me on this one.
Wilbur Snyder, Van Nuys, California, versus Gene Kaniski, Edmonton, 275.
Well,
tough card, right?
I'll tell you, tough card because they're from all over the place. Jim Hady was a huge babyface star in the 50s in various places. Guy Mitchell was just starting out at this point. Guy Hill, his real name, so you would think that's, late 50s, early 60s. Bob Geigel would later on become NWA president, but was centrally located in the Central States office in Kansas City and an NWA promoter, but he was also a a top wrestling star and a hotshot amateur in his day. Lenny Montana became an actor and appeared in The Godfather. Nick Roberts is the father of Baby Doll and was the Amarillo promoter for years after he retired from wrestling. Hardboiled Haggerty was a movie star, and it was in too many movies to count. Roy McClarty was a top babyface in the 50s and 60s, as was Wilbur Snyder, one of the overlooked babyfaces of the Dumont Network and the mid-50s Chicago and Midwest wrestling boom. He was up there with Bruiser and, fucking Rogers, anybody of that time period. And Gene Kiniski had a huge run in the AWA, or the Minneapolis, Minnesota, whatever territory, in the late 50s, and would go on to be a big-time player, including NWA world champion. The question is, where the fuck was this? Because everybody's from all over the place. It would seem by the main event that it would be late 50s, somewhere in the Midwest, potentially Minnesota, at first blush.
I would say that's a fairly reasonable blush.
Well, since I'm blushing, let me try to narrow down the year here, because it could be early 60s also. Oh, but God damn it. Let's say 19... but he was 1961 Minneapolis or St. Paul.
So very close.
Oh.
The card, presented by the Minneapolis Boxing and Wrestling Club Incorporated, the Minneapolis Auditorium, Tuesday, December 13th, 1960.
Oh, I was 18 days from being right.
That's right.
All righty then.
All right, Jim, well, let's go to this next program. This is an interesting one. The opener, Ray Vilmer, St. Louis 210, versus Ray Eckert, St. Louis 210, 15-minute time limit. The second bout, a 30-minute time limit. Ernie Dusick, Omaha, Nebraska 230, versus Pete Peterson, New York 215. The third bout, Rudy Dusick, Omaha, Nebraska 225, versus young Frank Gotch, Columbus, Ohio, 208, 30-minute time limit. The fourth bout, Pat McClary, Los Angeles, 285, versus Lou Thez, St. Louis, 228, 30-minute time limit. Also a 30-minute time limit for the fifth bout, Ali Baba from Kurdistan, 206, versus Hardy Kruskamp, Columbus, Ohio, 215. And finally, the main event, one fall to a finish for the British Empire Heavyweight Wrestling Championship, Jim Londos, St. Louis, 205, versus, and I may get this wrong, I apologize, Johan Vanderwalt, South Africa, 212.
Well, when you said Vilmer and Eckert, I said, my God, we're in the 40s. But with Ernie and Rudy Dusick, Ali Baba, Hardy Kruskamp, and Jim Londos, and Thez in a preliminary, we may be in the 30s. Although, God damn it. The Dusicks spent time, I have a couple of programs, including autographs from the Dusick brothers, when they were in the Northeast in the late 30s, but Thez would not have been there at that point. Young Frank Gotch. Am I fixating on that for no reason, or did he turn into being somebody, or was that just a stunt with somebody that we've never heard of? Is there any picture of him?
There's no picture of him in here. I will double check on that, but it's important to note for anyone listening, this is obviously not Frank Gotch from the turn of the century.
Yes, and like in boxing and wrestling back in the, the early pioneer days, when somebody came along that reminded the experts of so-and-so, or the promoter wanted to make you think that he would remind you of so-and-so, they would call it young Frank Gotch. There was a young Samson. There was a young John L. Sullivan or whatever. God damn it. California. Why am I thinking about that? I sound like the amazing Kreskin now. This is going to be, is this 19, would Thez have been champion at all at this point? And he first won it in 37 for a brief period of time. But Los Angeles, California, 1938. I don't fucking know.
The program, promoted by Thomas N. Pax.
Oh, St. Louis?
St. Louis, Missouri, December 15th, 1937.
Well, son of a gun, I was almost there on the year, but I would not have imagined, because I don't have the Pax programs, and I would not have imagined this Vanderwalt character main eventing against Londos in St. Louis, but that was before the Muchnick era. So there you go.
So there we go, and let's get one more here. The opening bout, Jim, Apache Gringo versus Mr. Fuji. The second event, Pedro Godoy versus Billy Red Lions. The third bout, a special event, the Alaskan and Frank Monty versus George Scott and Tommy Siegler. And then we have two main events, Crusher Stasiak versus Bull Curry and Johnny Valentine versus Mil Mascaras.
Holy shit. Okay. Well, everybody knows who Mr. Fuji was. Pedro Godoy was a journeyman at one point. Wasn't he one of the masked Russians? Billy Red Lions, we talked about him on this segment a couple weeks ago when we had a program from years gone by with a guy named Billy Lyons. The Alaskan was Jay York, and Frank Monty was a guy who looked remarkably similar to him and actually worked as a team with him as the Alaskans for a period of time. And then Frank Monty also teamed with Nick DiCarlo in the Tennessee Territory. George Scott, this was before he got Alzheimer's. Tommy Siegler was most noted for being a Southern star of Georgia, Florida, various places. Crusher Stasiak is Stan Stasiak, and Wild Bull Curry, everybody knows who he is, Johnny Valentine and Mil Mascaras. The thing is, these are people who at one point were over in a variety of different places, but this has to be Texas to bring them all together. And I've got to say, because of the Alaskan and Frank Monty being together, George Scott not being with his brother Sandy, Tommy Siegler being a pro at all, Stasiak, Curry, Valentine, Mascaras, is this 1972 somewhere in the Dallas, Texas wrestling office, whether it be Dallas or Fort Worth or thereabouts? That's as close as I'm going to come.
And you came close enough. The Dallas Sportatorium for Big Time Wrestling, June 20th, 1972.
Bam! Let's end on that one.
And on the cover, this Saturday, world title, Fritz versus Funk, Texas Stadium. Parade of Champions Wrestling Spectacular. So this is
And did they not do about 23,000 people to see Fritz and Dory Funk Jr. for the NWA title at Texas Stadium that year?
I believe so. I mean, Dory Funk Jr. drew everywhere he went, didn't he?
Well, but Fritz and Kaniski, I believe, didn't they do 20? Wasn't it like 25 or 26,000 at Texas Stadium back in 66-ish?
Maybe.
But nevertheless.
Well, there it is. Guess the program, and we end on a high note because
I got one.
You got one. Let me put this down over here.